Welcome everybody to Frank Analysis. I'm your host Franco, and I'm joined today again by David Sparia of the Political Refugee and Charles Anderson of the Lone Wolf Podcast and Jeff Melton of the Bitter Pill. How are you all doing today?
Doing great.
Great.
Doing good. Nice weather in South Carolina today. Nice and cool.
In terms of the police, I'm currently not at the stance of completely abolishing them, but I do think that definitely they need to be defunded, and we need to focus some of that, reintegrate that money into other programs that'll lead to crime prevention, like taking money out of police funding and putting it towards neighborhoods and good jobs, affordable homes, healthy food, green places to play, to produce less conflict, better mental health services to prevent mental health crises, which can become violent, and then replacing those with empty lots and underfunded schools. Like, let's have better schools so that we can have more educated people, so that they don't do dumb stuff that, like you said, Charles, is just asking for police to arrest you.
Yeah.
Now, whereas the roles that police play in society, their main roles are for maintaining order. They respond to crisis. They respond to criminal justice, and within those, they have so many different jobs. Like they monitor traffic. They monitor neighborhoods. They come and arrest criminals. I want to ask you guys, could there be some jobs within those realms that police could be replaced by something else? And then I can give you guys some ideas that I have for maintaining order, when it comes to traffic violations that are monitored by police. I think that could be replaced by machines, like taking pictures of people who are speeding and all that, and we're seeing some of that happen now. Then if things escalate, like if there's traffic violations that escalate, like if there's somebody that's crashing into a whole bunch of people and then hurting people, then that's when you call 911, and then that's when the police come and then try to stop this individual. Much like how the ambulance and the fire department functions. So, if there's a fire, you call the fire department or the ambulance, and you call 911, and then they come. It's not like the fire trucks are just driving around looking for a fire to put out. That's just wasting energy, because the majority of your time you're not going to find anything. When it comes to responding to a crisis, only, like I said, only go when they're called upon, like 911. If it's someone that's high on PCP or hallucinogens and they're acting out violently or they're tripping really bad, I don't think it should be only the police that go. Certainly there should be some strong men or women that should go for backup, but there should be a specialist, like a drug specialist or a therapist, that can help calm the situation down, that they know what they're doing, while also having backup. If somebody is on PCP, you're gonna have to help restrain. But when these people that are specialists for this kind of stuff, when they're not there and it's only the police, sometimes they end up killing the person unnecessarily, when they could have just been sedated or something. And the police have to wear body cameras when they come do this stuff. I was at a rally the other day. A mother was telling a story about how her son got drugs that were slipped onto him. He had a bad trip. The police came, and then the police ended up throwing him out the window and tried to make it seem like it was the guy who committed suicide. That could have been prevented if a drug specialist was there, or a therapist or whatever was there to help de-escalate that situation. When it comes to criminal justice, as far as catching criminals, I think you can leave the investigating to detectives, and then once they've gathered enough evidence to get a warrant for someone's arrest, bring some strong men or women for backup and arrest this person. I was reading that theft, assault, murder, this causes only police only come after this stuff after the crime has been committed, right? So to help prevent those crimes, we could have a neighborhood watch, have people who are more trusted in communities to keep watching, and if things get out of hand, just call the police. So let's start with you, Jeff. What are some roles that you see the police could be replaced with other stuff?
Yeah, well, I'll get to that, but first I just wanted to say if we're gonna solve, these problems that we have, we've got to have, a clear and detailed understanding of what the problem is. And, we've, one of the problems we have is we've got cops killing, 1,000 people a year in this country. Not all of them black. A lot of them are not. They just are an unaccountable institution that feels like they're the law. They can do whatever they want. And Charles mentioned something about the general population not being very smart or educated, which is true. We need a lot better educational system in this country. But what about the cops? All they need is a high school degree and like well under a year of training, and you're a cop. And I think David was mentioning how we need to change the kind of people we're selecting to be cops. Obviously, I agree, but consider the possibility that people who are trigger happy and who are bullies or want to be bullies, want to have that they're on a power trip and want an excuse to bully people, that those people might be getting selected on purpose. Graham Elwood did a segment recently where he talked about a police force somewhere, I think it was in Washington State, I forget, where they were giving potential cops IQ tests and deliberately weeding out anybody who scored above a certain IQ, deliberately selecting people or selecting out people who were too smart, so to speak, to be cops. And the courts ruled that was perfectly legal for them to do that. I believe I posted on our little Twitter discussion list article, Confessions of a Former Bastard Cop, by a guy who says he was a cop for a long time and has all these experiences with how totally fucked up policing is as an institution. Basically one point he made is, the old saying, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so, similarly with cops, if you're a cop with all this weaponry, everything looks like a problem to likely be solved through violence. And so Franco makes a good point that in a lot of these problematic situations, a cop, particularly one who's poorly trained and probably selected because they're a bully and not necessarily that bright, that's the last person you want to call to try and address this problem with, whether it be a domestic squabble or somebody with a drug issue or whatever. There are other people who are much better equipped to handle situations like that in the vast majority of cases. And so there's all kinds of things that have been tried in recent years to reform the police. Bias training or more community policing or having cops wear body cameras. None of them have even put the problem, really. They don't care that their actions are on film because they're not being held accountable anyway. And we've got to keep in mind that, yes, to some extent, cops do serve a role of protecting and serving, but for the most part, they're not there to serve us. They're there to serve the people who are in power. I've been, an activist for my whole adult life, so I have a lot of experience with cops or whoever, state police or whoever showing up at protests, and they're bastards, as this guy says, because their role is to protect property and to protect the interests of the rich and powerful more than it is to protect and serve us. And so, you know, that's a big reason why these minor tweaks are not going to solve the problem. So, you know, we need to get rid of the fact that, you know, the things that are in place that make cops unaccountable. This qualified immunity policy that a lot of departments have, where, you know, cops basically are not, you can't hold them liable for you know, most of the decisions they make in the line of duty. You know, like this little town I live in, Bloomington, Indiana, you know, less than 100,000 people. The cops have an armored personnel carrier because the mayor and a lot of the city council people thought it would be a great idea to have this, you know, $300,000 vehicle to deal with riots. I doubt that they've ever used it. But you know, they're armed as well as a small country, apparently. And you know, that's obviously part of the problem. When all you have is a gun, and every problem feels like target practice. But I would highly recommend this article that I mentioned. You know, some people have said, "Oh, how do we know this guy's a real cop?" And you know, we don't. But it sounds like he knows an awful lot about the problems that exist in police forces, and has a lot of really good ideas about what we need to do about it. So I would recommend that everybody read that. And he also cites some resources on other people who've thought about this. And I must confess, this hasn't been an issue that I've studied a huge amount. So you know, I don't know all the ins and outs of what will or won't work and why. But I think this is something that we all could stand to learn a lot more about before we decide what to do.
So, Dave, do you think that there are some roles that the police currently play that could be replaced by other people or machines?
Yeah, I mean, the machine thing, when you said that, my little spidey antennas went up when you said start taking pictures. I am a big civil liberties guy, and I used to live up in Bradenton, Florida, and you go over a stop line, they would take a picture of your car and send you a ticket in the mail that you went through a red light. And these red light cameras got very intrusive to the point where people would hit their brake too hard to try to make sure they stop. Bam! Somebody from behind them hits them because they're so paranoid. You know that moment where, is it yellow? Is it red? Do I have enough time to get through? It just turned yellow. So
you never know how long it's going to be yellow.
Right. All these lights are calibrated differently. I mean, I've been in a situation where I'm like, damn, I could have just went through that light. It was yellow for another 3 seconds. But up in Bradenton, Florida, needless to say, Bradenton got rid of their calibrated traffic lights, their pictures, because people were complaining about, so, not to belabor that, I just wanted to give you an example of it. I get very weary when there are more cameras and more video. Now, people will say on the other end, hey, at least we've got, the body cam. I don't have a problem with the body cam, because the body cam is basically, if the cop didn't do anything bad, the video cam will prove that. If he did or she did, video cam is going to prove that as well. So I don't really have an issue with that per se. Although, if I'm a cop and I'm suiting up, is that going to make me behave better? Is it going to make me you would think it might make cops behave better. So I'm thinking video camera on a cop, body cam, okay. So long as it's not going to be used for any other purposes. And again, we open up a can of worms with other, issues that civil libertarians like myself would be very concerned about. As far as other people doing other jobs that the police currently do, I will admit that there is this issue that I've always had with the cops, is that they get into doing busybody stuff. As far as writing tickets, do does town hall and does the state and does whoever, local municipalities, do they have quotas that these officers have to meet each month? I'm told that they do. And that's why the old adage is, oh, I got a ticket. It was June 30th and I got a ticket. Surprise, surprise. So you wonder about all of that. And that would take a real act of getting under the hood to see how these things are accomplished. Like if you don't have enough tax revenue, guess what? Might be time to raise some taxes on some rich people to pay for some of this stuff, rather than some poor schlub who parked his car in the wrong spot. And this is the mentality. And I'm not saying you don't have laws. To what Charles was talking about, you do need laws. If you're out there in your car, you're only supposed to be parked in a space for an hour, and you're there. I would say, maybe give the person benefit of the doubt. Say, okay, it's been an hour and a half. I'm going to have to write them a ticket. But cops are doing a lot of things. I know you have meter maids, and you have parking in some cities. You have a separate group of people doing things. And I think obviously that's a job that can be farmed out to other types of people. But when it comes to social work, if the cop is there again to answer a domestic disturbance, is it a violent domestic? See, these are things that have to be. You talked about having a cop and having a social worker there. Well, that doesn't really eliminate the cop's job. You just actually added another job, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. Maybe the cop, rather than handling it in his or her brutal kind of way, can say, okay, I'm going to give this over to you. It appears the situation's under control. I'm going to step out. You now can step in and see if you can mediate this situation. You're probably going to have to give a firearm, though, to the social workers. I mean, I'm just saying, there are going to be situations that look fine and placid and then can turn on a dime. But it might eliminate this sort of shoot first and ask questions later mentality. These are issues, Bruno, that I think we're really going to have to sit down and look at everything a police officer does and then break it down by level of importance, kind of like we were talking about with the big ticket issues versus little ticket issues. What are cops really needed for? Cops show up on scene to accidents all the time, right? Big car accident, the cop is well armed and it's an automobile accident. Probably don't need a cop who's got a firearm for that. Probably need somebody else. Call it something different. But again, are we really cutting the police force, or are we just diversifying the workforce within, under the umbrella of police? And again, I'll be honest with you, I'm not smart enough right now to know all the, kind of like what Jeff was saying. There are a lot of things that you would have to consider before you go in there. And you, again, be careful with the language. Don't tell folks that we're taking their safety away from them. Tell them, yeah, your public safety will be still at 100%, but we're going to have different people doing different jobs, and they can still secure your property, public property, whatever it is that needs to be secured, while at the same time kind of emphasizing more, I guess, detail, to the things that need to get accomplished. I think you will get some pushback from people who say, hey, well, this is the best system we've got right now. And, you're going to have a lot of that sort of, hey, well, the military and the cops, we all stick together. We're all a brotherhood, sisterhood. And these guys serve their country, and they should be able to come home and get a job. And I don't disagree with any of that. I'm just wondering if that's the right job for them to take after, they've taken a little bit of sniper fire over in Iraq or whatever. I think maybe you might want to give them a nice desk job, something a little mellower, something a little, and it's sad what we do to the veterans that come home. It's really sad, and that's another issue. But, again, we're pro-war when it comes to going into other countries, and we're kind of pro-war when it comes to going into cities and doing the things that we do right now. And I think, again, like I said in the last little talk I gave here, is I think we need to change our approach. I think we need to change our mentality, and we need to hire a different group of people who don't have those same life experiences. Maybe someone suggested, and I don't necessarily think this is a bad idea. I don't know, this might sound crazy to you guys, but if you're in a primarily African American community, you might want to hire all African American cops. I know that sounds kind of like segregation a little bit, but if you want to build up trust in your community and you want to take this element out of the equation and say, well, race is a factor here, well, at least you can eliminate that. You could say, okay, well, you have black police force. And by the way, I think that would be good for the community, especially if the cops are decent people. You know, you've got role models, you've got people that you can look up to. And it also speaks to some of what Charles was talking about, is that, hey, you know, maybe some of these cops, they have the moral authority to address the kid who goes outside who looks like he's about to be in some sort of gangster rap video. And you could say, hey, you know, I became a cop and my father did this and my mother did that, and have somebody there to kind of mentor these kids. And again, you take away that element of, you know, white people, for instance, don't really understand what's going on in this community. So to send a white guy in from the suburbs to police the inner city with all African Americans, I know that sounds like we're going backwards as far as, like, you know, we went through all of this desegregation throughout our existence here in this country to try to integrate people, but in this instance, I think it takes that off the table, and it also makes it for maybe a more harmonious situation in these places. I mean, maybe it's a dumb idea, I don't know, but somebody, it wasn't me that thought of it, someone else I was watching, and it might have been Tim Pool or somebody like that. I was watching one of his videos, and it occurred to somebody there that wouldn't this be a better idea? I don't know. These are tough questions. These are really good questions, Bruno, and it's probably better for some kind of progressive think tank than yours truly. But I appreciate you giving me the shot.
Yeah, it's good we're brainstorming. We still have like a good background since we understand systemically how a lot of this stuff in our politics and society works. So, Charles, you want to pick up on what David said? Your mic is off, Charles.
Yeah, sorry about that. I hit that when I was moving my mouse around. I'll pick up with what you said there first about replacing with machines. Okay. That's already being done in a lot of places. I don't support it, though, in a lot of ways, because I'm right there with David. That gets too much into the civil liberties argument. You know, now arguably some people are going to say, well, they've already violated it. They're already spying on you. Your cell phone's tracking you everywhere you go. It's listening to your conversations. And yeah, there's definitely an argument to be made there. But when you make it so bold, when you just put it right out there in front of everyone, now they see the camera and then they get even more concerned about that. They're like, oh, they're spying on me. So I don't know how well that would be met. In regards to breaking up their jobs to a degree, this is a point that I've brought up before. With Spartanburg County Police, not Spartanburg City, but Spartanburg County, they have the divisions, okay? If there's a wreck and 911 gets called and it's within Spartanburg County limits, guess who doesn't respond to it? Spartanburg County. You know who does? Highway Patrol. That's Highway Patrol. Highway Patrol is the one on the road, right? So in other words, have different divisions in police department who are trained to do their job. And that's like the problem with Spartanburg's city police, is they're trained to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. Okay, whereas the county, you've got a bomb squad, you've got your K9 units, you've got the regular cops that just patrol around the town. And then again, if there's wrecks and things like that, now they might bust you for speeding tickets. They will do that, but they're not too bad about it either. Again, they kind of more or less leave that stuff to Highway Patrol. So you train your different divisions so that they know their job. You know what I mean? Likewise, you know, when you have a disturbance at your house, you don't have necessarily, unless it's a huge thing, you don't have the detective come out. You get the regular cop, okay? So there's a we kind of already have this. It's just more or less improving upon it in a lot of ways. But something else that a lot of people need to take into consideration, and boy, am I going to sound like the right winger here. Okay. This idea that what we need the police for is to be there so that when there's a problem or someone comes to our house, we call the police. If we're trying to reform police having to respond to situations so much because we feel like they're getting too out of hand, understand this. Now, in a bigger city, this might play a different role, but when you get out into like my neck of the woods and there's a lot of land, and you've got this one police department that's over a whole county, but it's not like you see them around every corner, okay? The time it takes for them to get to you can vary, okay? So in other words, if it's going to take them average of about 10 to 15 minutes before they get to your house, even in a domestic dispute, even in a robbery, unless they just so happen to be right there on top of you, it doesn't exactly use much reason to think that, oh, guy broke in my house. Let me call 911 and wait 15 minutes on the cop to come deal with it. No, you kind of need something, if that happens, to be able to protect yourself. Okay, which is, again, this I feel like in a lot of ways the left's argument that we've heard for years on the whole gun reform thing, not to say there's not some valid points to it, because there are. But this idea that people just need to stop buying guns. You've got some who are moderates on it that just say we want a better system for buying guns, we want better background checks, and then you've got the Beto O'Rourke to the world who are just saying turn them in, just like Dianne Feinstein did, by the way, back in the 90s. You go watch that clip, okay? So you've got different people who look at this different ways. But without a doubt, people need to be able to start protecting themselves better within their own homes, for sure. That's why, responsible ownership with a firearm is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing in situations like that, because you don't even have to call the police until after you've resolved the situation. Because if they break in your house and are looking down the barrel of a gun when they do it, you might not even have anything stolen. They might just sit down and wait on the cop to come, or they might take off running. Okay. Again, people try to say that in areas where we have more guns in the country, we have all this problem and all the amount of gun death, and they try to compare it to Europe. But then you go to Europe and find out no one really has a gun. Okay, so you can't really put those numbers on par with each other. But my thing is, we've already kind of got some areas where the police are more divided. That might not be a reflection on every police department, though. And that, again, brings up the question of, why do we not have more of a uniform training process for cops? David brought up having, if it's a black community, having a black cops. In theory, good idea. The problem you're going to run into is, and I think this is honestly contributed to a big problem in the police department today. I can tell you right now, it contributes to an issue with my job. And here's what happens. You don't get people applying, and you start lowering your standards on who you're willing to hire because you need a body for the job. So in other words, since we have that problem between the police and people of color, you might not have an influx of people of color trying to become police. And if you need so many police to try to cover that area and you've only got one cop, well, you're kind of up the creek without a paddle now, aren't you? Okay. So in other words, in theory, that wouldn't be too bad of an idea. It'd be actually a pretty good idea, because they're going to understand the community. However, I think this is something that can be resolved without looking at someone's, skin, for example. It's going to come down to a training. You could be white, but again, this is something I brought up before. You take someone out of their element, they get more nervous. So that's where instead of just teaching them how to take someone down, cuff them, shoot them, or tase them and mace them, maybe instead of teaching them just tactics, as part of their training once they hire onto the department, and you assign them to a particular location. So in other words, if you're guarding the Westgate area of Spartanburg, okay, and you're in that area, then maybe as part of your training, you need to get out in that community, meet people, talk to people, and get to know the people in that town if you weren't born and raised there your whole life and don't already know them. Because you could have been a white kid in the town, but you know all the black people that grew up around you, and you kind of know how things are. If you don't have that background, then part of the training should be getting to know your community better so that you understand the people, you understand how they act, you understand what they might deem a joke, because ironically enough, that stuff can differ. The mentality can even differ from just one county to the next. Okay, people can act different ways, and it could be just that short of a distance. And you've got a lot of cops who live in my neck of the woods or that work in Greenville, or vice versa. They live in Greenville, work in Spartanburg. You need to know who you're dealing with. And I think that is a big, thing that could be addressed there too.
All right, there you guys have it. It's one of the great things about conversations like this is that you get perspectives from different parts of the country, because communities are very different as you go across the map. I'm in Maryland, Dave is in Florida, Jeff is in Indiana, and Charles is in North or South Carolina?
South Carolina.
South Carolina. And the way communities are structured are very different. And it's good to talk about how we can have like a broad way of reforming police, but also how some of those elements may not work in certain communities across the map. So with that, I thank you guys all for watching. I thank Dave and Charles and Jeff for coming on. Please subscribe to their channels as well. Dave is the host of The Political Refugee. Charles is the host of the Lone Wolf podcast, and Jeff is the host of The Bitter Pill. So thank you guys so much again, and don't forget to stay informed.
All right. Thank you. See you soon.
Thanks for watching that segment of Hear Me Out. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell down below so you can get the latest on sports, pop culture, and progressive politics. Stay informed.